Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining the Women in Leadership International Women's Day event, Leading with Vulnerability and Authenticity with Lori James, Executive Director of Making Changes Association. This session is presented to you by the WIL Alberta Chapter. I'm Carla Posnikoff, and I help with events and marketing, and I'm joined here today with Heather Thompson, our Alberta Chair. Before we get started, we like to see where everyone's from and joining from. Type it into the chat if you like to share. First, I would like to go over 3 housekeeping items. Please mute your audio throughout the presentation. Utilize the Zoom chat feature to comment or ask questions. We will be happy to answer as best we can. This presentation will be recorded and shared on women in leadership platforms such as YouTube. I will now hand it over to Heather Thompson, our chair of WIL Alberta Chapter. Heather will go over the land acknowledgement and share more background information on Women in Leadership Foundation.
Hi, everybody, and welcome today. We're really excited to have you here, and we've got a really great presentation for you. Also want to say, it's International Women's Day, so celebrating all of you women that are here today. Carla asked where we're from. We even have people from Australia, so we've got from Calgary, Edmonton, Kelowna, and in Australia and into the States. So excited to have you here. So my name is Heather Thompson, and I am the Alberta Chapter Chair. And so today we have over 161 people that are registered for this event today. So I'm so excited to be able to host this, and really honored and blessed to be able to host this, especially on such a special day. So I'm just going to share a little bit about the Women in Leadership Foundation if you're not aware, but it was founded over 20 years ago by Maya Canagan, she's our founder, and it resulted in a chapter in Vancouver. And then following, we have chapters in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Kelowna, Victoria, Vancouver, Northwest Territories, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And each chapter is run by women like you that are we're volunteers, and we want to dedicate our time to help bringing women together and help to empower people. So Women in Leadership is about advancing women, not only advancing, but also empowering women to reach their full potential, to scale new heights in their personal and professional development, and explore the impossible together as a community, all coming together. And 2023, like 2022, continues to be a year of such transformation for women, and we're really excited to be part of that journey. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. So we are in Alberta. So we acknowledge that we live and work on traditional territories of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Alberta, and in particular Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories, and express gratitude and respect for the land we use, and whose footsteps have marked those lands for centuries. So again, as Carla said, the event will be recorded and posted on WIL. So enjoy. I'm going to hand it back over to Carla.
Great, thank you, Heather. Like Heather said, happy International Women's Day. Today, we celebrate and recognize the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women and those who identify as women. The 2023 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion campaign is called Embrace Equity, which supports a vision of an inclusive world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, no matter the gender. Everyone worldwide can acknowledge and celebrate International Women's Day on March 8th today and throughout the entire year. I am honored to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Lori James. With over 30 years of experience empowering teams, supporting clients, and generating results, Lori's career focus has been on the value of relationship building, both internal and external relationships, and their impact on the bottom line. Lori's career journey has taken her from for-profit work in the business and communications training field to launching her own personal coaching business, to working in nonprofit organizations. Lori has spent the last 15 years in senior roles within nonprofit organizations, guiding and supporting strategic planning, program development, human resources, funding initiatives, and stakeholder engagement. In October 2022, Lori joined Making Changes Association as their executive director. The association has over 40 years of empowering women, those who identify as women, and teen girls, helping them reach their full potential. The alignment of Lori's passions and the vision of values of making changes is an exciting chapter in Lori's life, bringing her experience and lifelong focus on people full circle. Through some humbling mistakes, tough lessons about vulnerability, and some wonderful mentors and colleagues, Lori learned the value of stepping into her true self, finding her voice, and knowing that we all deserve to be heard and belong. Lori teaches us that we are all leaders, regardless of what our professional title says. Lori, it is a privilege to have the opportunity to hear your wisdom and learn from you today. Thanks for being here, and I will now hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. I am honored to be here, part of this speaker series, and especially on such an important day. So happy International Women's Day to everybody. And I am just going to share my screen here. And there we go. Can you see my screen? Carla, are you able to see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you to everyone for joining today. We're going to start with a question. Have you had an experience where you were treated differently at work because you are a woman, but wondered if you were being oversensitive? Maybe it was in a meeting or the way you were introduced. Maybe you were asked to do something that your male counterparts are never asked to do. Maybe it came down to how one of your ideas were received and how someone responded to you. Although we have been conditioned with the phrase, "Don't be so sensitive," if it feels like you're not being treated the same as your male counterparts, it's not in your mind. We have every right to be sensitive. There are stats that help tell the story. Women are 30% less likely to get promoted out of an entry-level position than men. For every dollar a man earns, 76.8 cents is what a woman earns. Women in Canada hold 35.6% of management occupations and 30.9% of senior management positions. And less than 4% of publicly traded organizations in Canada have a woman CEO. And those numbers multiply in the wrong direction for women that are facing intersecting forms of discrimination, such as racism, colonialism, ableism, or homophobia. Less than 6% of management and senior positions are held by a woman of color. And that number is even smaller, 1%, for women who are Black, Indigenous, have disabilities, or are LGBTQ2S+. Short-term and long-term absences continue to be stigmatized and viewed through a lens of a lack of commitment, reliability, and ambition. And the fact is, we know women continue to be the primary caregivers for children. So we are the ones that have to take time off work for doctor's appointments and school events and sick days. Women are doing more to support employee well-being and foster inclusion. And this critical work is spreading us thin and is mostly going unrewarded. We are more likely to experience belittling microaggressions, such as our judgment being questioned or being mistaken for someone more junior. And because of all of this, we tend to apply for 20% fewer jobs than men, despite our efforts to look for jobs in the same way men do. The fact is, the stats don't lie. The current structure and systems have added barriers for women when you compare to men. But despite what the numbers tell us and the barriers that we may encounter on a daily basis, I firmly believe that being a woman gives us a competitive advantage at work. The key is how we identify what those advantages are, both as a gender whole and also individually and personally. How do we lean into those differences and advantages, leveraging them wherever possible? And most importantly, how do we love and celebrate those differences in ourselves and in each other? In my experience, a key component to competitive advantage is linked directly to vulnerability. We are whole people with whole lives that we bring into everything we do. The idea of leaving your personal life and your personal situation and what's going on at home at the door when you walk into work, it's false. It doesn't happen. We can fake it for a little while, but ultimately, what's going on and our true selves comes through. Learning to be true to myself, being vulnerable with others, creating space for people to be vulnerable with me, and finding meaningful connection, it has been the key to any success that I've had in my life. And it's been essential to my learning, my growth, and frankly, my survival. Vulnerability isn't just important, it's been a key competitive advantage in my career. I do want to highlight that leadership and the opportunity to lead with vulnerability doesn't happen when you get the word manager or supervisor added to your title. You have an influence and impact at every stage of your career and in any position that you hold. You can always lead by example. And I absolutely adore this quote by Brené Brown. And while some of the things that we're going to talk about over the next 40 minutes or so will have some formal leadership slants to it, I really want everyone to keep in mind that leadership is present at every level. I'm going to start with a high-level picture of my career journey. And don't worry, I'm not going to start with I was born in a log cabin and bore you with all the details of every stage in my journey. But there are a few things that I want to highlight. First off, I recognize my privilege. Being a cisgendered, heterosexual white woman born in Canada has afforded me privileges and advantages that I have not earned. And I want to recognize and acknowledge that. Secondly, there have been some really key professional positions that have shaped me both personally and professionally and influenced my career. And while the positions have been important, what's really has been transformational has been the people. They have been the essential piece to my learning and growth. That includes some good, some bad, some tricky, but ultimately it's all worked together to make the recipe that is me. And lastly, you'll see about a handful of dates on my journey here that are in purple. And when you read the details, you'll see they're more personal in nature. Moving cities, getting married, having my daughter, family illness, and death. Lori, you may say, that doesn't belong on your career overview, but they do. My personal experiences and yours as well inform who you are. They impact your career, not only while you're going through them, but how you see things in the future. We are whole people. So while these personal milestones may not belong on my resume, they are 100% part of my career journey. I turned 50 this year. And the process of preparing for tonight's event and just reflecting on this milestone age has been a great opportunity for me to learn and give some thought to the lessons that I've learned. So we'll spend a bit of time just breaking them down for you. And we're going to start with the 80-20 rule. If I give you 10 pieces of feedback on something that you've done, 4 of them are glowing. 2 of them are really positive with a couple of tweaks, and 1 is more negative. It isn't really a positive statement at all. Which comment do you think you're going to spend the most mental and emotional energy on? The negative. It's human nature. And it is so easy to get sucked into focusing only on the negative. Early in my career, I was managing a team of people, and I had a good relationship with everyone on the team except for one person. He disliked me so much. It did not matter what I did. He was disrespectful. He was dismissive. He was flat out rude. I leaned in, had some vulnerable conversations with him, asking him for feedback, trying to figure out why he didn't like me. And if anything, it just seemed to make it worse. I spent so much energy on him and trying to figure out a way to get him to like me. It was mentally and emotionally exhausting. It took me a while, longer than it should have, to realize that it didn't matter what I was doing or not doing. He was just never going to like me. And that's where the 80-20 rule comes in. And it is something that I use every day. 10% of the people you encounter and are in your life will not like you, will not like your decisions, will not like your ideas, regardless of what those may be. Maybe you remind them of their mother-in-law or someone in high school who was mean to them. It doesn't matter why, but the fact is you've got to let them and their opinions go. You're never going to change it. 10% of the people in your life are going to love everything you do. You could make huge mistakes, make bad suggestions. They will forever say that you are wonderful and everything you do is wonderful. Where you have the space of greatest learning is in that 80%. These are the people who will be honest with you, who will tell you if what you're doing is good or bad, who will give you the feedback you need. The challenge is not getting focused on the 10% who are never happy, that negative loop, and not getting really comfortable and living in the 10% who adore you. You got to find a way to focus on that 80% because that is where you're going to learn the work most. And a point of caution, don't assume because somebody doesn't like you or doesn't like something you've done that they are in that negative 10%. They actually may be in the 80% and are just being honest with you. So how do you know if they're in that 80% or in that negative 10? It's about self-reflection, having vulnerable conversations, looking at patterns in the feedback that you're getting, and ultimately just being 100% honest with yourself. Often you know. So if we're looking for that 80% to give us honest feedback, let's talk about feedback. We're going to do a little poll. We're just going to ask people to drop a number in the comments. What is the most important part of feedback? Is it the person who's giving you the feedback is being kind and clear? Is it the person who is receiving the feedback is being open? Is it the opportunity to have multiple conversations, or is it all of the above? So Carla, I can see the comments here.
Yeah,
which
so I
is
see
awesome.
a 1 come through, a 4, another 4, yep, another 4. There was a 2, mostly number 4s, and then number 2.
So 4 is definitely getting the bigger vote, but a sprinkling of within.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for voting. To get that 80% to foster and be willing to give you that feedback, for me, ultimately, it's about creating space to get the feedback. It is about how you receive it. If you can't create a safe space for people to tell you how they really feel, you will never know the information that is critical for your success and your growth. Nobody likes conflict, and giving feedback often can feel like conflict. And so whether it is a member of your team, your direct report, your boss, your colleague, it is your responsibility to create that space. And it is also your responsibility not to defend yourself, not to go on the defensive, even when you may want to. I'm going to share a situation with you that is a real situation from my professional life. So there was a a situation going on at work, and a direct report, a member of my team, was really upset about it. The situation I personally and professionally had no influence on. It was happening outside of my control, but this individual felt like I should be doing more or should have more control over it. She was very upset about it, very anxious about telling me about it, and sat on it for a while until finally she just couldn't hold it anymore. She came into my office and she let loose. She was yelling. She was saying things that were mean, little disrespectful. Basically, she was just vomiting all over my desk. She was just unleashing on me. Now, it would have been very easy for me to get defensive and frankly to get upset. And instead, I held space. She needed the opportunity to process and get her emotions out. She needed the opportunity to have a shitty first draft. There was no way she was going to be able to come to me and have her points calmly and thoughtfully laid out. So I asked her questions. I prompted her. I encouraged her to get everything out. And then when she was done, I thanked her. I said, thank you. That obviously has been bothering you, and I really appreciate you taking the risk and coming to share it with me. What I'd love to do is book a time to connect tomorrow or later in the week so we can talk this through and figure out some options for change. When we eventually did sit down, she acknowledged, wow, I did not handle that well. I am so sorry. You could have been really upset at me, and thank you for that. But she needed the opportunity to process the emotion so we could get to a place of logic and conversation. It is really important to give that space to people. It is the only way you get that 80% to come to you, and it is the only way you actually get to learn. Now, giving people the opportunity to give you feedback doesn't mean you have to agree with it. But if you can stay vulnerable and open and figure out your defensive triggers, it makes all the difference. And I will say, don't avoid those follow-up conversations. They're tricky and they're hard, and it's really easy, especially when it's been an awkward dumping of people's feedback on you, to just go, okay, we're gonna push through this and never look back again. But it is really important to both you and the other person. You have to close that conversation loop. Own and learn from your mistakes. We all make mistakes. Everybody does. Sometimes they're small and nobody notices, and other times they're larger and it seems like everybody in the world is aware. Another personal story for you. When I was very early in my career, so early, this is back in the day when I didn't have my own email address. Email was not in everyone's computer. So that tells you how old I am. I was working for an organization that was membership based, and I had a member call me, and they were very upset about something that the organization was doing. And they wanted me to convey their concerns to the board of directors. So I listened to that person vent. I frankly thought they were being unreasonable and a little bit rude, but I took my notes and got all the information that I needed to and hung up the phone with a promise that I would pass it along. So I typed up my notes, sent it in a fax, again, another old tech alert telling you how old I am, and sent it off. And my notes included my personal opinion about what I thought about this member, and it was not a positive personal opinion. As I pulled the fax confirmation sheet off the machine, I realized I had just faxed it to the member. I was horrified. There was no taking it back. So I called the member directly and I owned it. I acknowledged I was not professional in the way I handled it. I should not have put my personal opinions in there. I wanted to let her know that I would be calling the board chair next to explain what happened, and also make sure that her original concerns were going to get to the board chair. I then called the board chair and I owned it. I explained what I did. I told him what I did as far as calling the member. And I said, what do I need to do? What else can I do to correct this, make this better? The moral of the story, where this all ended, is 6 months later, that board chair hired me to join his organization. He told me that he wanted me to be part of his team because he knew he could trust me. Everyone's going to make mistakes, but he knew that I was going to own my mistakes, not cover them up, and that I was committed to learning from them. I ended up staying at that organization for over 10 years, and it was just a major influence in my life personally and professionally. And the only reason I got that role is because I was honest about a mistake. Own and learn from your mistakes. Emotion equals relatability plus trust. I received some advice from a man early in my career that there was no place for emotion at work. It was all about business, and emotion makes you look weak. But I'm here to tell you that as a woman leader, you don't need to have all the answers and none of the emotion. Another situation fairly early in my career, there was a really upsetting situation that involved with a member of the team. The team member was quite upset, got angry at a bunch of us, and actually walked off the job. The rest of the team, and myself included, was really shaken by what happened. We were quite concerned. We were concerned about her. She had said some pretty terrible things to us. And then there was also the work that needed to continue to get done. As a leader on that team, I went into figure it out mode. I shut down my emotions, and because, that's what I was supposed to do as a leader, turn off my emotions, and I got down to figuring out what needed to be done. I focused at the tasks at hand. Once the dust settled a couple of days later and we were out of that crisis mode, we were doing a debrief as a team, and the team shared something that absolutely broke my heart. They felt that I didn't care. They also felt like I wasn't allowing them to have an emotional reaction to what had occurred. Little did they know, I was having an emotional breakdown on the back end. I wasn't sleeping, I was stressed out. But they couldn't know because I had completely shut that part of me down. And as a result, I lost the trust and connection of the team, and I took away the space for them to have the reaction they needed so they could process and get through. It is really important, and I, from that point forward, have always been truthful about how I'm feeling about something so that others know it is okay to be honest and vulnerable as well. There are people that will say that they will never, ever share anything personal at work because it's going to be used against them. Possibly, but I want to ask you a question. Are you using the 80-20 rule when you're considering this? In my experience, yeah, there's about 10% of people in your professional circle that may use it against you. But the fact is, you've got 90% of the people around you that are going to support you and will make it a much easier experience and, frankly, maybe even benefit themselves. My mom battled cancer for 9 years. I was her primary caregiver the entire time. There was nobody else to attend critical doctor appointments or treatments that she couldn't do alone. Someone who had to rush to the hospital when she had falls or broken bones or ended up with infections. Day to day, that 100% fell on me. Did it impact my work? Of course it did. Did I do absolutely everything possible to minimize that impact? I sure did. And my bosses and my colleagues saw that. They appreciated that I was honest about what was going on in my life, but I was also doing everything I could to minimize that impact. It built some personal collateral so that when things did happen outside of my control, and they did, there was grace and understanding from the people around me at work. I couldn't have survived those 9 years without the support of my colleagues. And I 100% attribute that to me being vulnerable and sharing what was going on. It's a fact. When people don't have information to fill, they will fill in the blanks themselves with their own assumptions and guesses. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people and worked with people who are experiencing a personal challenge and they don't want to tell anybody and they don't tell their colleagues. But then when they're having to cancel meetings last minute or being a little bit short-tempered, people are filling in the blanks. At first, they get a benefit of the doubt, but then you start to hear the rumblings. I don't think she cares anymore. I think she might be looking for another job. I used to like working for her, but man, she's unreliable and just unfriendly to work with. If people knew the story, they'd have some understanding and they would not be building their own story based on incorrect and unfair information. The last thing I'll share around this is if you are honest and vulnerable with people in a formal leadership role, how it is so much easier for them to be vulnerable and honest with you. And in a formal leadership role, if you know the whole story and you have all of the information, it makes it so much easier to support that individual and manage the situation. People are whole people. And if they can be their full selves with you and you get the opportunity to support the whole situation and the whole person, that is where the magic happens. And that only happens if you are leading with vulnerability and honesty. Assumptions will get you nowhere, but curiosity will show you the way. I was working with a woman. This is sort of midpoint in my career, who I was leading a team of instructors, and there was an instructor who we'd had some feedback that her expenses were higher than clients wanted it to be. And we were seeing the trend that she seemed to be expensing a lot and at high-end stuff. So I had a conversation with her, gave her the feedback, let her know that we have to be really mindful of expenses. She told me she understood, and away we went. Then a few weeks later, she's off to an event, training event, and she sends in her expenses, and oh my gosh, they are probably one of the highest expenses we had seen up to this point. The claim was unbelievable. So I get on the phone with her and I just start. I was disappointed. I thought we had a conversation. This is just really upsetting. I don't know how we're going to handle this with the client. I don't know what to do, and I don't know what more I can say to you. How can we get this to a place that is more where we need it to be? This instructor handled it perfectly. She let me vent, and then when I was finished, she said, "May I explain?" Well, it turns out the course was in Washington, D.C., which was a very, very expensive place to be. The client booked her in a hotel that was in a part of the city where you shouldn't be out of the hotel once it was dark. So after the course was finished at the end of each night, she couldn't leave the hotel to go for dinner. She had to eat at the hotel. Expensive hotel, expensive restaurant. She took the cheapest thing on the menu each and every night. She did everything she could to minimize those expenses, but there was only so much that was within her control. Holy doodle, did I feel terrible? And frankly, I lost all credibility with her and all respect. If I had started with curiosity and asked her, "Can you explain to me what's going on? Can you help me understand why the expenses the way they were?" Man, it would have been a completely different experience. The added bonus with curiosity, and I'm talking genuine curiosity, not leading questions where you're trying to catch someone in something, and it happens more often than you think, is that when someone is explaining or answering your questions about a situation, they often come to their own awareness if something is a bit off or maybe wasn't ideal. So curiosity supports those tricky conversations without having to do all of that heavy lifting. Progress over perfection. Try, and try again. I have fallen into the trap of waiting until everything is perfect before doing something or taking action. For me, that can be a sign of people pleasing or avoidance. I have also been annoyed when somebody hasn't asked me what I think or if I'm okay, if it's pretty obvious that I'm upset. That often is a sign that maybe I'm tired, need a good night's sleep, or even avoiding a tricky conversation and being vulnerable. Ultimately, you are responsible for asking for what you need and sharing for what's important to you. If somebody doesn't ask you, but you have something that's important to share, the ball is in your court. Even a small step in a direction is better than no step. Don't discredit momentum and small wins. That includes attempts at being vulnerable and authentic. You are going to make mistakes. You're going to have conversations that don't go well, but learn from them. Those don't have to be roadblocks. At the most, maybe they're speed bumps. Ultimately, you need to try, figure out what doesn't go well, own your piece of that, and then try again. Progress over perfection. It's how we keep learning. And lastly, be yourself and like yourself. You are the most powerful when you are your authentic, whole self. You can admire people, you can learn from people, but do not try to be them. Be you. I have had advice over the years and pressure from my supervisors to handle situations in a way or have conversations that are not true to me, my values, or my style. And when I've tried to do that, it goes horribly. When I am anyone other than myself, I upset people and I don't get the results I want. It has taken me years to figure out my superpowers. And frankly, if I'm being vulnerable and honest, it's probably more that it has taken me years to be willing to embrace my superpowers. It's very hard when you've been told or you see that your superpower is disrespected or not valued by the people in your life. But when you embrace your superpower, it won't feel so hard because you know that you are being your true self. A piece of advice that was given to me by a colleague years ago that changed everything for me is don't compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. It is directly linked to the importance of being curious. We judge people and make assumptions based on how they present, how they dress, how they talk. And that in turn impacts how we judge and view ourselves. Maybe we see someone who's walking around with confidence and always seems happy, and you're thinking, wow, maybe I'm the only person who worries about failing or worries about judging, disappointing people, or maybe I'm the only one who doesn't think I'm good enough or is feeling overwhelmed. But before you make any judgments about yourself based on what you are seeing of someone else's outsides, be curious, be vulnerable, and have a conversation. I promise we are more alike than you realize. Self-reflection, doing the work on ourselves, figuring out how to truly love ourselves, it will help you take those risks to apply for that job, to ask for that meeting, and be vulnerable about how you're really feeling and what you really need. You have to identify, embrace, and celebrate your superpowers. And on that note, we are going to take a moment and we are going to share our collective superpowers. Please put in the chat what makes you you. Not afraid to speak my mind, being a connector, helping others. Love it. Empathy, people person, everything about me, loving myself, organization and reliable, seeing the big picture, relatability. Oh, this is amazing. Oh, people person, building and supporting teams, authenticity. Oh, there's so much. There is so much there. There is so much about just embracing and celebrating those superpowers. To wrap things up, my superpower is empathy. The fact that I am a woman who has chosen to live my life and lead with vulnerability and authenticity so I can leverage that empathy, it has been my competitive advantage. And it's what has brought me to where I am today. I have been so privileged to have some amazing relationships and experiences that have influenced me on my journey. I am still learning. I am still making mistakes. I have my many moments of insecurity and wondering, like, do I have it all together? Some days, no. Most days, no. But I am committed to being real, having honest conversations, and staying vulnerable, and ultimately being me and staying curious. So I would like to end this with a couple of thank yous and a request. So thank you very much again to the Women in Leadership team, Carla and Heather, for inviting me to be part of this and for all of your support. Thank you to everyone who is part of tonight's event. And here is my request, and it's a three-parter. Own and celebrate your superpowers. Take one small step towards being more vulnerable at work. And lastly, celebrate a woman in your professional life by thanking her for being vulnerable and for sharing her superpower with you. We are women, and hear us roar. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lori. There's so many actionable items and from these lessons that you've shared with us today, and we're so grateful to have you on. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I'm going to pop in Lori's LinkedIn for everyone who's on the call. I'm just going to type it into the chat here. You can follow Lori on LinkedIn there. So I just popped in the chat. As we wrap up, I'm just going to share my screen one more time. Just 1 second here. All righty. Perfect. Great. So yes, thank you. Thank you, Lori, for everything that you've shared with us today. Thank you everyone for joining and listening. And we just want to hear your feedback. So we're going to be sharing a link just in the chat. And if you fill out that link and you fill out and complete the survey, you're going to be entered to win one of 2 Starbucks gift cards sponsored by WIL, but it's going to be provided by Brave and Bold Coaching. So please do take a moment to fill that survey out. It's always great to hear just what you liked about the session, or any kind of information you'd like to leave us. We would love for you to stay connected with us so you can become a member of WIL on the Women in Leadership website at womeninleadership.ca. Some upcoming events that WIL is going to be hosting is the next one is on Tuesday, March 21st. It is a career development webinar held by the WIL Vancouver chapter. It is called the Speed Career Coaching, and it is designed to give you tips and advice on your career if you have any questions. On April 5th, the next cohort for the Leadership and Development program begins. Become a more confident and effective leader. It is a 12-week program, and it's held and hosted by Heather Thompson and Carrie Schwabius. You can find more information about these events on the Women in Leadership events calendar on womeninleadership.ca. Great, and thank you everyone again for coming to our event. And if you're curious about WIL Alberta and our blog, we release weekly content on our blog. So you can visit wilalberta.wordpress.com to sign up to get that free content delivered right to your inbox. As we wrap up, thank you, and thank you for joining, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
And Carla, I did put the link in there. I couldn't do it the way we did it, but the link is in there for the survey. So it would be great if people filled that out just for us to help us continue to grow and develop in the things that we're offering. So please take a moment and press that link and then go into the survey. So that would be great.
And I realized I didn't open the floor for any questions or comments or anything. So also happy to stick around. Yeah, if for anything, sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, we have time for sure. Yeah, we'll just stick on the line and anyone can drop a question in the chat.
Brene Brown's books and TED Talk. That is, yeah. I want to be Brene Brown when I grow up. Ignore everything I said about being authentic. No, I'm just kidding. She's amazing.
I think we're probably good for questions unless I haven't seen anybody type into the chat. So yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming. Happy International Women's Day. I know there's been lots of events and activities. Oh, there is a question here from Laura. Two questions actually. So one first question is from Zara. Do you have any recommendations on books for this topic, Lori? What would you recommend?
Honestly, pretty much anything by Brene Brown. I would highly recommend. She just does a lot around that authenticity and self-development, leadership development. I think you just can't go wrong with that. And she also has so many practical things. She's also got some podcasts. I know she's sort of suspended her podcast right now, but you can on Spotify or I know for sure you can go back into her catalog. There's just so much you can gain from that. I think you can't go wrong there. And even on her podcast, she's the one she brings on other authors to speak. And I've found a lot of great books just listening to the podcast and realizing, this is one I want to dig deeper into. So it's a great low/no cost way to find some gems. And then I see there was another question. How do you handle when you've held someone in high esteem and then they change roles? Ultimately, and then become the boss from hell. Honestly, it comes down to what is your deal breaker? In my experience, I have chosen to have really challenging conversations with supervisors and bosses, including some what I would kind of qualify as those career limiting conversations that you realize this may do me in, but I just had to choose as to whether or not I was going to be able to handle the status quo or if I was going to do something that would try to influence change. I would say, though, before you have those conversations, you want to write out what you want to say. You want to try to get some emotion out of it. Like some emotion isn't bad, but if you're talking about someone who is a quote unquote boss from hell, they probably aren't going to be open to you coming in and vomiting on their desk. So you got to meet them where they're at and put what's out there. And then ultimately you have to decide what you can tolerate. Not all the conversations are going to influence the change you want to see, but at least you can know I did my best and I was honest about what I could do. Yeah, that would be my advice there. Good luck. Good luck to you. That's a tricky. And if that's someone who I've worked with, my apologies. No, I'm just teasing. I didn't recognize the name. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Carla and Heather. All your support to get me to this stage is just greatly appreciated.
Of course, anytime. And it was a pleasure to have you, Lori. Thank you.
Thank you.